Welcome everyone to today's webinar on global insights for localizing the Sustainable Development Goals in Canada. I'm John Beal. I'm the Program Director for the Local Futures Project, which is an initiative that's focused on how Canadian communities can turn the ambition of the SDGs into local action. And I'm also joined by my fantastic colleague, Laura Carr-Priest. Today's webinar will dive into how we can make the SDGs, or also known as the global goals, work in our local communities. And we've invited experts and change makers who are turning the SDGs into action from across the world to share their experiences today. Our work is supported by the Government of Canada's SDGs funding program and is based at Conrad Grebel University College on the University of Waterloo campus. The campus is situated on the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, which is built on the Haldimand Tract, which is land granted in 1784 to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River, from its source in Dundalk to its mouth at Lake Erie. Now, the Haldimand Tract was land granted to support the Six Nations in perpetuity, but this did not happen. Our work at Reconciliation with Indigenous Peoples includes decolonizing our historical narratives, our minds, and our hearts. And this is an ongoing process, and we have a long way to go. We do this in humility and gratitude to our Indigenous neighbors, past and present. Over this past summer, we convened a series of conversations with leading global cities to learn how they have moved beyond the ambition and vision of the SDGs towards the integration and impact in municipal processes and operations. And we're thrilled to have a number of those interviewees here today as speakers. So I'd like to introduce Marcus Ljungqvist from the Sustainability and Agenda 2030 division of the City of Malmö in Sweden. Nirvana Srikassoon, the project manager with the City of Durban in South Africa. Pleased to have Mayor Barry Verbanovich, the mayor of the City of Kitchener, Ontario, a longtime advocate and champion for the SDGs in Canada and abroad. United Cities and Local Governments co-president, Federation of Canadian Municipalities past president. And he'll be joining us shortly, just a little late, but Professor Pedro Neves, founder and CEO of the Portuguese consultancy Global Solutions for You. And he's contributed closely to the creation of multiple voluntary local reviews in Portugal. We'll have time for questions from the audience, so please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we have a chat enabled if you'd like to introduce yourself and share with others about your own work. And we are recording today's session, and we'll have the recording available through our website next week. So let's start by talking a bit about the context of the SDGs. We know the SDGs set an ambitious vision to build a more sustainable, safe, equitable, and prosperous world for all humanity by 2030. Unfortunately, we also know that no country is on track to achieve them by 2030, with Canada ranking as 25th in the world as of 2025. Thankfully, over the past 10 years, the SDGs have gained momentum from municipal leaders around the world as a useful way to connect municipal and community efforts around shared sustainability planning. This localization of the SDGs within communities is a critically important way for the SDGs to find success. So from our conversations with cities around the world this past summer, we heard three core themes on the importance that they place on the SDGs to their work locally. The first being the SDGs create coherence in planning by consolidating programs and policies under one comprehensive framework. We can think of this as you might have an economic development strategy, a climate plan, an accessibility plan, a transportation master plan, many other strategies as well, which can all kind of feel a bit separate from each other. But the SDGs create this kind of planning framework from the umbrella from which they can all fit within and kind of communicate with each other in effective ways. Some of the examples we heard about from the interviews we conducted, talking about how the city integrated into existing steering and management systems the SDGs, how the SDGs were connected to the city's political goals, and how they aligned actions for mayoral mandates. The second kind of core theme that we pulled out from these conversations was this idea of the SDGs create the impetus to plan for sustainable development using a more of a systems thinking approach, understanding the complexity and the interconnectedness of community issues. And this was in many ways happened in many ways, but a few examples around how it gets incorporated into the city budget, or using the SDGs to develop strategy, kind of using that multi-dimensional framework of the SDGs. For example, outlining in food security, how food security and health and well-being and climate are all closely linked in a municipal food strategy from one of the examples that we feature. And the third being the SDGs support partnerships and collaboration within the local and the international community. And so one example, looking at how the local community came together, creating an SDG alliance, bringing stakeholders from across the community to drive policy framework for long-term sustainable development. We also have seen examples where working relationships with local universities and colleges led to the creation of voluntary local reviews, to SDG data platforms, and mapping of SDG activities by community organization. And then, of course, fostering and deepening several international relationships as the international community focus on the SDGs and come together frequently to follow up and plan. We also asked, what advice would you have for communities in Canada looking to get more engaged with the SDGs, whether it's within the community or within the municipal government? And we have a number of advice points that we've created into an infographic, which we'll post into the chat. A few of those that I wanted to highlight, though, one is around you have to breathe the SDGs. You need to build an understanding of what holistic sustainable development actually looks like and what citizens want for the future. We don't need to start with a statistical debate about goals and targets and indicators. It's about integrating, not duplicating. So how do you connect the SDGs to existing political goals and reporting mechanisms, and not creating a burdensome another layer of work, at least as a starting point. And you don't have to stress about not hitting all the targets. The third point here of advice, you need to foster broad ownership and dialogue. How do you build ownership of the SDGs across departments and throughout the community? They are a great platform for dialogue and consensus building. And then the last one I wanted to highlight, adapt the language of the SDGs to the local context. So how do we talk about them in a way that resonates in the community? Maybe focusing on the issues or the principles or the vision for a better world. Advancing the SDGs doesn't necessarily mean we have to talk about the framework, the 17 goals as presented by the United Nations. They represent many issues and many principles that we want to make sure that gets passed forward and talked about. So those were just a few high-level takeaways from our conversations and research from this past summer. There's a lot more in the documents that Laura has been posting in the chat with many specific examples. So I encourage you to check out that work using the links that are being posted in the chat. And with that, I think it's time to come to the panel conversation. And so I'd like to re-welcome our panelists today. Marcus Ljungqvist from the city of Malmö, Sweden. Novanas Rickasoon from the city of Durban, South Africa. Mayor Barry Verbanovich, the mayor of the city of Kitchener, Ontario, in Canada. And Pedro Neves, the founder and CEO of the Portuguese consultancy Global Solutions for You. I see Pedro's joined now, so welcome, Pedro. So maybe I could start off with you, Novana, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about one or two ways that you in the city of Durban have been working with the SDGs over these past few years.
Thanks, Marcus, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today. Thank you for the invitation. So I think essentially in eThekwini, despite the other work that we've done, we've realized the importance of continuing to create awareness around the SDGs. So in addition to actually conceptualizing projects to advance the SDGs and achieve the goals, we've on a constant basis come up with innovative ways of creating awareness of the SDGs. So those have been in the manner of undertaking community murals, developing a comic book around the SDGs. And I'm actually just going to share my screen quickly so that colleagues can have a look at what that actually looks like, just to give them an idea. So this is actually the cover page of our comic book together with the QR code for the comic book. And that has actually helped us to engage young people much more, create awareness about the SDGs, and bring them on board in our projects. These are some of the workshops we've undertaken with scholars, where we've taught them about the SDGs and also got them involved in conceptualizing projects that will help us to achieve the SDGs. And then finally, these are some of the examples of the murals we've done. And I particularly like the murals because it is not just developed by an artist. These murals actually involve a process of undertaking workshops with communities. And those communities then conceptualize the design of the mural. The artist then finalizes the design, and the community also comes together with the artist to actually paint these murals. So, those have been some of the examples of how we've gone ahead. And sorry, I'm just realizing it possibly didn't share.
Yeah,
Did
we
it,
can't see
Marcus?
it. We can share it after the fact
Okay,
if you
anyway,
want.
I'll
Yeah.
share it after. Yeah. Okay. So those are some of the ways we've gone about working with the SDGs recently. But I think more importantly is the actual projects in terms of achieving the SDGs. So we've looked at what are our challenges in the city, looked at how we think we can solve those challenges whilst being aligned to the SDGs, but we haven't concentrated on particular SDGs. We've sort of collaborated and looked at how we maximize the potential of those projects to deal with several SDGs at the same time. So the projects are multifaceted. They involve multiple stakeholders and become almost transversal in nature. In addition to achieving the SDGs, they're also helping us to achieve the municipal mandates. So that's been quite beneficial to us from a project perspective, in addition to the awareness work.
Thank you. Maybe Marcus, I'm curious to hear from you a little bit also the experience in Malmö in Sweden. What does that interaction with the SDGs look like?
I am. I was. I was thinking if you were reading my notes when you were doing your first introduction, because you kind of said all the things that I had there. But we in Malmö we have been working for a very very long time with sustainable development. We started out like in the mid 80s, where the city almost died because the huge industry we had kind of was dying. And the mayor then he said that we should turn this from an industrial city to a knowledge city, and we should do that by being the most sustainable city in the world, which is kind of cocky because we are a very small city. We are about 350,000 people in a corner of the world in Sweden. But so since then we have been working with it, and actually started out with Agenda 2021, and most people don't think that know that's a thing, but that's where we started. And we also started with an environmental aspect of it. But the whole thing, but because in Malmö we have almost 190 different nationalities, and there's about 150 languages spoken in this small city. So we really need to figure out how to do this in a social way, and also in an environmental way, and how to get the economics running in that way. So, but 2015, when the SDGs came, our mayor then, Catherine, she was first up on the scene, signing up. It was like, we will be the first one reaching the goals, and everybody working in the city was like, oh my god, are we how are we doing this? But we have been working a lot with it since, and we have incorporated it into our budget. So the highest political goals, it's incorporated there. So the political goals are connected to the SDGs. But the whole thing about working with SDG is very confusing, because those goals are made to work in Sweden, South Africa, Canada, Venezuela, Indonesia. So it's very hard to, like, if you look at them, it's very hard. We shouldn't be hungry. Okay, so what does that mean for us in Malmö or in Sweden? Because it's fundamentally different for us than it is for in, say, Kenya. So we have tried to localize it, the goals. What does every sub goal means for Malmö, and some of them are not relevant for us. We don't have any deserts, we don't have any mountains, so we don't really work with them. So we try to do that, but also we try to focus on sustainable development instead, and treating the SDGs as goals, as we always do with all goals. These goals that we need to achieve. And in that way, we can incorporate the work with sustainable development in the development of our organization. So we are not finding new indicators or trying to find new statistics or anything. We just do with what we have, and then we check if there's anything we're missing, and then we try to change the organization to do that stuff instead. So everything is about what we already do, but we need to do it better. Kind of.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Maybe Barry, I want to ask you, as Marcus was talking about, the mayor being there, signing on to the goals from the get-go. You've been actively involved with the SDGs internationally for a long time. You've been bringing them to the city of Kitchener. Tell us a little bit about your journey with the SDGs and how the city of Kitchener has been approaching things.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, John, for the opportunity to participate, and greetings to everyone from the COP30 Leaders Summit here, local Leaders Summit here in Brazil. Just actually at the airport, heading back later today. But I thought couldn't have sort of asked for a better congruence of discussions this panel, and just having finished this meeting of local government leaders, trying to influence the national process that will take place over the next couple of weeks. For us, it really has been a journey, and I want to give Nadia Banton a shout out. I see she's one of the attendees in the session today, and she leads our SDG Idea Factory in the city of Kitchener. I'll come back to that in a moment. But I've been involved with them through my various roles at the United Cities and Local Governments, which is the global association of local governments. All of your cities at Equini, who hosted actually our global conference a few years ago, is involved. Malmo and the Swedish Local Government Association are involved, and so it's great to see colleagues who are leading in this space as well. UCLG has been involved even going back to the Millennium Development Goals, and then the transition to the SDGs back in 2015. And one of the things that we learned back then was that it was very much focused at a nation state level and not at a grassroots community level, and worked very, very hard to see local and regional governments be a cross-cutting theme amongst all 17 goals, but more importantly that we were able to see goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, actually make its way into the final list of goals, and the priorities and the work that has happened since then, including not just voluntary national reviews, but also voluntary local reviews as part of the process. Through my involvement in all of that, it certainly made me reflect as a leader, because it was around the same time that I became mayor in Kitchener back in 2014, about how we can really blend these two things into our, together in terms of our work, particularly from a strategic point of view. And so this is now the second full term that our council has linked our city's strategic plan, which is always done on a 4-year cycle to coincide with the term of council. We've linked it to the SDGs and the goals and priorities, and how they obviously, each individual goal and priority connects with various SDGs. As part of that, we also looked at, in particular, small business and how we support small business, and the whole notion of small businesses that are focused around sustainability, around groups that are equity-seeking groups, whether it's Indigenous folks, women, and others who are part of the local economy, and then of course social enterprises. And so the SDG Idea Factory has become an incubator that's led by Nadia and supported with her team, and has brought together numerous community partners. We've been fortunate to be able to showcase it throughout its existence. In fact, former Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Dowdeswell, who some of you may remember from her time as Executive Director of UNEP, was there for the opening, as well as the former federal minister. We have had former Prime Minister Trudeau there and others. And really trying to demonstrate the work that the city of Kitchener is doing, and telling the story. And so I do note that this particular panel today is being, and the work that you're doing, John, is being partially funded by the federal government and the SDG Secretariat. And so I want to give them a shout out and thank them for their ongoing support of this, because I think it really is important work, particularly at a time now when we're seeing on so many fronts questions being asked about the value of multilateralism. And I will tell you, coming out of the Local Leaders Summit here in Brazil, there is, if there's questions about it at the national level, there certainly isn't questions about it at the local government level, and a renewed commitment. Probably one of the best things I saw was 50 U.S. mayors participating in the Local Leaders Summit, which is fantastic, and certainly sends a message to the leadership south of our border.
Thank you so much, and thanks. I appreciate that you're in an airport lounge on your way home. So thank you so much for joining us here. Maybe Pedro, I want to go over to you. Maybe building on some of that, and this idea of multilateralism, is in danger at the national, but maybe not at the local, which is great to hear. What would you say the SDGs are particularly good at doing when it comes to the work in a municipal government? And then maybe I could also ask, and we can open this up after, but can they go further? Where do you think that they can go further in any areas?
Yeah. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure being with all of you. I think I always start by saying that everybody likes to speak about the future, and development is the future, but development is not always good. And so the question is, what is good development? And good development is good when it's good for the people, for the planet, and for prosperity. And so what we are really talking about is a way about speaking about the future that we want for our communities. And I think this is the most important thing. And then the second is, if we agree that we want good development for our cities, then what is the language that we are going to use? And then SDGs becomes a language and becomes a way of thinking. And what has been very interesting is that, municipalities, they always have, most of them have organizations based on silos, and silos do not always communicate with each other. And for us to work on the future that we want for our city, we have to break down these silos, and we have all to speak with each other. And this is the starting point. The second thing is, what are we going to do to improve quality of life for people while we are protecting the planet? But, coming from Portugal and now developing VLRs in multiple locations, I would say that the first step is to localize SDGs, which means breathing SDGs, adopting sustainable development as a public policy. The second step, it really is about planning, and planning is about VLR. And so I think the VLR movement is something very concrete that we have established. And it's amazing. Now in Portugal, we had our first voluntary national review in 2017, the second one in 2023, and now municipalities are coming together and saying, we have VLRs. VLRs are much stronger than VNR. And so for the next VNR in 2027, we want you to have our own inputs. And why is this so important? It's because the phase about implementing VLRs is implementation. And how are we going to implement the VLR? How are we going to implement the SDGs? And well, today we have the MAFRE model. It's the most advanced one. And the first time we start speaking about implementation with the mayor, he said, yes, I think we are going to have 30 projects, and we are going to have some 50 million euro of SDG projects. Today we have over 300 projects, and we have 1.1 billion euros in the pipeline. And so SDGs is not just good for people, because we create jobs and we improve salaries and we make everybody visible. It's not only good for the planet, because we are decarbonizing, we are managing, improving the management of water and waste, but it's good for business. And this is very important. SDGs are good for business. And when SDGs are good for business, this means that it's not just the environmental department or the strategic planning department that is going to discuss the SDGs. It's the mayor himself that is going to discuss what is the future and how is he going to implement. And so the second step, it is to have the pipeline of projects, so we know what we are talking about. We are not only talking about a vision, but we are talking about strategy and projects. And then the second step, it's about stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement, for us, the whole thing starts with having a SDG lab. And so we have multiple people coming from different departments within the municipality that create the SDG lab, and that actually they are the pilots of implementing the pipeline. But then we have a SDG Alliance, and the SDG Alliance brings together the private sector, academia, and especially civil society. And so everybody is part of the solution. So it's not just coming and complaining about the problems we have. It's about coming together, designing solutions, transforming solutions into projects, and most of the projects transforming projects into sustainable economic and financial businesses. And when we do this, we see the SDGs as actually a leverage and an accelerator to achieve the future that we want.
Thank you. I love that that comprehensive picture that you paint for the SDGs. I think it's very compelling, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Maybe I'll move on actually. Curious about a bit of the behind the scenes, within the municipal landscape. How have you found that the SDGs make their way into the kind of the lifeblood of the municipality? Pedro you mentioned about breaking down those silos, which is so important. Has it been a smooth integration? Maybe Nirvana, back to you to start us. Has it been a smooth integration, and do you find there are certain challenges that the others should know about as they kind of go about this work as well?
So I think for us, yes, there has been a smooth integration. That's not saying it couldn't be better, but essentially how it started was as soon as the SDGs were adopted, because eThekwini engages in quite a number of global platforms. Colleagues from within the city gained knowledge of the SDGs and then came back to the city, and we started sharing that knowledge amongst officials in the city. So we increased the awareness of the SDGs amongst our officials. But the most important step was to align what we call our integrated development plan, which is the 5-year plan for the city, as well as our budget, to the SDGs. And that's recognizing the fact that the municipal mandates are aligned to the SDGs. So we were not being asked to do anything new when the SDGs were approved. Yes, there may be some shortcomings and differences between the municipal mandates and the SDGs, but essentially they were aligned. So after that alignment was done, we then recognized the need to take that further. Our highest decision-making body within the municipality is our council. So in 2020, we actually went through to council with a recommendation and a resolution that requested the formation of an SDG institutionalization committee that would look at how do we institutionalize, mainstream, and localize the SDGs within the city. We also, at that stage already, obtained approval to undertake an annual voluntary local review and then to appoint SDG champions in the city. So that was a very high level indication of how it started in the city. We then proceeded with the localization of the SDG indicators, where we looked at whether the indicators were applicable in our context or not, and then localized accordingly. We started with the process of data collection and then up to the point where we undertook and completed our first voluntary local review in 2024 and then a minor review in 2025. The lessons we've learned along the way, I did speak to it earlier, but mostly it links to collaboration, and a few of the colleagues have already mentioned it. We need to learn to work together, basically. We're not going to get anywhere if we try and do these things on our own. We need to bring communities on board. It also matters when it comes to data collection for voluntary local reviews and for monitoring of the SDGs, because cities don't collect all of this data. So by collaborating with academia, civil society organizations, etc., we have access to more data that tells us what our status quo is as far as the SDGs are concerned. The other thing that we have learned, in as much as we say that the municipal mandates are aligned to the SDGs, we did find that the SDGs are not always a consideration when projects are conceptualized within municipalities. So what we've started doing now is bringing our project managers on board to get them to align projects to the SDGs at the planning stages of projects so that we can monitor through the life cycle of the project what is the amount of money that's being spent on the project, for example, which of the SDGs is it helping us to achieve, etc., etc. I did speak about data and then the lack of data. We've also been engaging with academia, civil society organizations to try and access more data. And then maybe I just want to end on the issue of funding. Within South Africa, there's very limited to no funding for additional projects and programs that are related to the SDGs. But what we found through the engagements we've been having and working on the SDGs the last few years, as well as our voluntary local reviews, is that we always think we need new funding, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we do. Sometimes through networking, collaboration, and then partnerships, within the municipality, locally, internationally, it is possible to do some of this work without additional funding. So that's actually helped us quite a bit as well.
Great. Yeah. Thank
Thanks,
you.
John.
Yeah, thank you. I know, Pedro, you have to leave a little early, so I might just kind of throw back to you on this one. From the work that you've been doing, is there tell me about this integration within the municipal space. Like, have you seen it typically in Portugal and elsewhere be like a smooth integration? What do you find are some of the kind of speed bumps that maybe others should be aware of, and kind of a bit of that behind the scenes?
Thank you, John. My strongest recommendation is for SDG teams from around the world, from different cities, to contact each other. It's amazing, I've learned so much from the VLR of Bristol, which I consider is one of the best. I then moved to Japan to see what they're doing in Japan, to Brisbane in Australia, and it's amazing. When you contact an SDG team in another country, in another city, 5 minutes after, you're starting to talk with them as if they are your colleagues. And this is very important. It's very important that the SDG teams, we all contact with each other because we are all learning. And so it's everything that I'm now saying actually is ideas that I have imported from all these different places. In terms of main suggestions, it's mandatory, as they do in Japan, to have the mayor directly leading the process. For me, it needs to start top down. Mayor has to say, we want the community to speak SDG. We want SDGs to be our language. Then the second step is to move bottom up. Once the mayor tells the teams for them to speak SDG, then it's time for the SDG team, the municipal SDG team, to speak with the civil societies, to speak with the private sector, to speak with academia. But it's very important. The SDG team are the ones that have to drive the process. And this is very important. So we have to promote the SDG team. We have to empower the SDG team. We have to tell the SDG team they are the catalyzers. But being the catalyzer means putting the civil society on stage, means asking the private sector and having and involving the private sector to be co-founders of the VLR, co-implementers of the VLR and the pipeline. And this is where the magic happens. So we are really talking about a new way of designing and implementing public policy, bottom up, but with a clear direction coming from the top. Then the next stage, I believe it's we are now doing this in Brazil. Just came from Brazil as well, and we are doing the first VLR, which is a public-private partnership. It's a mining city, and we have the mining company working together with the mayor, and they are designing the VLR together. And this is amazing because this obliges us to ask the mining company, you have people first, you have planet protection, and they say yes. And then we have the mining company, the CEO of the mining company asking the mayor, listen, for us to do this, we need some profitability. We need prosperity to be integrated. And this is amazing. So when we put all these together, again, focused on very strong support from the mayor has to be there. His image, his speech has to be. What we now have achieved in Brazil is that they are so happy with the impact. They have included the SDG implementation as part of the constituency of the city. And so the municipal government, rather than just writing a law to implement SDGs, they have put this in the constitution of the city. And so SDG is part of a long-term process. So it's not just like, because one of the things that is very important is that we have to implement SDGs beyond a political mandate. And so everything that we are doing has to be for the next 10 years, for the next 20 years, for the next generations, those that are not yet conceived. And this obliges us to go beyond the political mandate. When this happens, it's amazing. And you really see the people, the civil society, the students. Something else very, very important. Bring the students. As Navana was saying, creating SDGs ambassadors is mandatory. The best SDG ambassadors are children and young people. And so we have to go to the schools. We have to involve the professors and teachers, and they, with their students, are catalyzers of SDG implementation. That's my takeaway.
Thank you. I see some hearts floating by on my screen, so I think that's resonating. Maybe I'm going to jump around in the interest of time, but I want to go to you, Mayor Barry, as Pedro's talking about kind of, it comes from the mayor, and obviously you've brought the SDGs very strongly to Canada, to Kitchener, to many regions. But I wanted to ask, the progress has been relatively SDGs, and no country is on track to achieve them. How do we need to be talking about them for them to resonate in our communities? As the mayor, bringing this to the city of Kitchener and beyond, how do we kind of capture people into the SDGs, and why do you think things have been slow?
It certainly has been a challenge, and I think we all know particularly since COVID, which has been sort of roughly the last half of the period of since the SDGs were first implemented. The world is becoming an increasingly complex place with a lot of geopolitical realities, and then with all the noise around multilateralism, things like the SDGs, I think, have been impacted. I will also say, despite the great efforts of our SDG unit in Canada, and in fact, kudos to them, because I actually in the last couple of years have seen those efforts growing and enhancing, which is certainly music to my heart. We were off to a bit of a slower start in comparison to our friends in Africa, our friends in Europe and South America and elsewhere, where I think there was more broad adoption early on. I do agree with Pedro that while I'm a big believer in the importance and the role of team, and how everybody in for example, a municipal team has a role to play in this. Leadership is important, and back when I first started this conversation in 2015, 2016, and said we needed to do this, I got a lot of blank faces, and asked lots of questions around what the SDGs were, and you can imagine where some people's minds might have gone in the course of the conversation. And but it's changed a lot. And one of the things that's been really encouraging in my own community, and I think in others across Canada, has been the role that students have played, and that our elementary school system has played in raising awareness amongst young people. And I was at an opening of a school last year, for example, and first day of school, and what did they have around the schoolyard? Actually, was signs of all 17 SDGs, and talked about how the school is looking at educating young people to understand the role that they play locally, nationally, and internationally. And that was so awesome and encouraging to hear. And I think we need to do more of that. As a city right now, we've been doing this work for some time. We are working on our own VLR, and I was hoping we would have it done in 2026. I think we likely will be into 2027 by the time it's completed, and that'll align nicely with Canada's VNR, or next VNR, which is slated for 2027 as well. But I think it's an ongoing effort. There needs to be support from both the leadership of the organization, and our CAO has bought into this. I see also on this webinar today is Randy Said, who City of Kitchener was working with in terms of our last strategic plan, and some of this work as well, which has been encouraging. And we just got to keep driving at this, and not let the naysayers talk us down from what's really important work. To address these comprehensive issues in our communities. And at the end of the day, it always boils down to, I always say, everything boils down to goal 17. It's all about partnerships. No one of us can do this on our own. No one of us should do this on our own. And it's about coming together with all sorts of partners across orders of government, the private sector, academia, the not-for-profit sector, civil society, and tackling these issues together.
Thank you. So appreciated. I mean, I want to throw it to you, Marcus, actually, and we've, everybody's kind of covered a lot of different points, but I wanted to talk about kind of practical strategies here, and learning from the city of Malmö's experience. What lessons learned would you want to impart on others who are looking to to deepen their work here? Whether it's how do we integrate this into the municipal setting, how do we get the community on board? What stands out for you as kind of key lesson that you'd want to share?
Wow, it's I mean, so I also think it's very important that we remember that we have very different possibilities, and we start from very different starting points, because we were like way ahead when the SDGs came in 2015. So I wouldn't say it's been a smooth ride, because it have not, and we are not where we want to be. But it's also relative, because I actually checked the rating now, because I don't check that otherwise. Then we are actually second in Sweden. It's only the pesky Finnish, our neighbors, that are better. But I would say that. So my experience is that the SDGs are very complex, and the whole work with sustainable development, which I think is the core sustainable development, is very complex, but we tend to make it very complicated. So I think one of the core things you should do, or that I try to do every day, is to try to talk to farmers in farmers' language, so people actually understand what we are talking about. If I go to business in the private sector, I talk about business. I talk about how to become strong competitors, because it is a way to become a strong competitor as a private in the private sector. Because if you can show that you are having a sustainable business, you will get more profits from that, and you will get more customers or whatever you're doing. It's very clear that it's that way. And when you come to the citizens or the school kids, for instance, it's the same thing in Sweden or in Malmö, that the schools, they are learning about those 17 goals. They know them, and then they go home to their parents and they tell them, why are you doing like this? It should be like this. So I think that is like a very good strategy to work with kids and youths. And also, I have 2 teenagers at home, and they are way more knowledgeable about this than a lot of my colleagues, for instance, or the people I meet in work, because they use it a lot in school. They learn from social media, they follow the world, what's happening, and they have friends all over the world. So they kind of they have another approach to this than my generation has. So I think it's very important, again, to talk about it in a way that everybody understands, and not because it's very easy to go after those VLRs and those like political systems, and that is important in a conversation like this. We should have it on that level, but you should, when you work with it in the daily work, you should take it down a notch and not make it too complicated. We were in this project. We did the first VLR that was coming out there, and it was a huge undertaking. It took so much time, but it was very, very good to do that. We are not doing more VLRs now, but we on our internal webpage, we have following up on all the 17 goals. We do that every year. We update it with all the data and all the indicators and so on. And that will be available to the public also in about half a year or so. So our VLR is more like it's out there all the time, and we update it once a year. So, and we try to, and it's very technical, and it's for people who work with this, but we also try to do it in a way that like the citizens of Malmö understands this, and also try to explain what those 70 goals mean for us in Malmö, why we want to do this together, all of us. So, but take it down a notch and talk to people in a way that they understand, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Great advice. I see there's a couple of questions. I want to ask Nirvana also, same question though. Any lessons learned that you'd want to kind of impart on others from the experience in Durban?
A lot of it has actually already been covered. But I think, I can't echo the importance of consulting young people enough. I don't think we do enough of it. And from some of our experiences with them, even when it comes to solving some of the city challenges in alignment with the SDGs, they've got some amazing ideas. Over and above that, particularly from the conceptualization of projects, what we've realized is that a lot of projects can be crafted such that they talk to more than one SDG. And again, it brings up the importance of collaborating and breaking down those silos and starting to talk to each other, essentially, so that we tackle more than one SDG when we are working on these particular projects. Maybe just to finalize there, the other experience we've had is when it comes to reporting and monitoring of the SDGs. A lot of our officials have looked at these SDG targets and indicators and trying to collect data around those as a reporting burden. So what we've tried to do within eThekwini, especially during the localization of these SDG indicators, is to use existing indicators for our localized indicators so that we align it to reporting that is already underway. Of course, the localized indicators also help us to ascertain how far we are as a city on our own initiatives in alignment to the global SDGs. But it cuts down on that reporting burden and it brings officials on board much more. And then, of course, I can't echo the importance of having people that are passionate about the SDGs actually working on them. One of the issues we also had when we were initially establishing our SDG institutionalization committee is we got our heads of units or directorates or whatever they're called in your environments to appoint officials to be part of this committee. And eventually, when they realize the extent of work involved, they've just fallen off. So the approach we're using now is to look for people that actually want to do the work and are passionate about the SDGs and bring them on board instead. And we've had much, much more success with doing that. And then finally, I mean, I spoke about raising awareness when I started, and I don't think we can do enough of that. There's still a lot of people that have no clue what the SDGs are about, how it impacts on them, and the fact that it's an integral part of everybody's lives. So we need to continue with that awareness work. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much. And I'll just say right now we'll move into some questions from the audience. So thank you to our panelists for sharing your expertise and insight. Really appreciate it. There's a couple questions, Mayor Barry. Maybe I'll start with you. You answered it in the Q&A window, but this question around where's culture in the SDGs? How do we factor that in, this idea of culture as kind of our lived identity in our communities? Do you want to just speak to that? And you're on mute, just yeah.
Sorry, thanks, John. Yeah, no, listen, great question by Greg Baker on this, and I do think I think we all recognize that when we talk about complete communities, that culture plays an integral part of it. It's not just about the social, economic, and the environmental, but culture is, many refer to it as the fourth leg of the stool. I think it very much is a cross-cutting theme. And while it's not mentioned in and of itself, arts and culture plays a critical role in building our cities, as I said in the response, both as a quality of life driver for our residents, something that helps us both attract and retain talent in economies that are particularly those that are more innovation based, but also it plays an important role as an economic. I think about different places that we've been at, and for our UCLG meetings around the world, and the important role that arts and culture has always played in telling the story of the host community during those kinds of gatherings. And I just recently during the U20 meetings in Johannesburg, as an example, the role that the Soweto Theatre played, both in that community, in the revival of the Soweto area, but also in telling the story of apartheid and the story of the South African people. I think also, it builds into everything we do. And while not specifically arts and culture for focus, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our SDG Idea Factory, and the fact that one of the things it's been doing on an almost monthly basis now for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years, has been SDG Idea Talks on the various SDGs, and bringing community partners together to help tell part of that story. And I just think there's so much more that can happen on that front, and it's part of what we're looking at. In fact, in my recent State of the City speech, I talked actually about a mayor's celebration of the arts type of thing, and part of the reason I want to do that is because it's an opportunity to showcase young people. It is an economic driver, but often those arts and culture experiences tell the stories of the exact kinds of things we want to talk about when we talk about the SDGs.
Thank you. Marcus, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, if it's okay.
Sure.
Because the whole culture thing it's I would say that's like a foundation of working with SDGs, because we were talking about this. We had a post 2030 meeting with the Ministry Council of the Nordic countries, because what is happening after Agenda 2030, and we were talking about culture because a lot of the tools that we're using are artwork. It's art, it's theater, it's videos, it's photographs. That's what a lot of what the kids and the youth are using. So that is like the foundation to actually talk about and do something about the SDGs. But also we need to understand that culture, this is what we talked a lot about, culture in Scandinavia, for instance, like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland, that culture is very, very different, for instance, with South Africa. We just had a delegation from South Africa here, and we were talking a lot about that, because things that we think, how we look at the SDGs are very different from what they're doing in South Africa or in Australia or in China or whatever. And we need to remember that. And that is why it's so important to localize the SDGs, to tell every citizen that this is what it means for us. That is probably not the same thing that it means in South Africa, because they have other like problems and other possibilities than we have in Sweden. So I think culture can be two things. I think culture as in arts works, that is the foundation of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And then culture is like our culture as living humans. That is, we need to take that in consideration when we work with the SDGs and the localizing them. It's super important when we talk to that.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a couple more questions we'll try and get to. So in the few minutes we have left, I just want to note there are a number of resources that are being posted in the chat. We will make sure to have that in our wrap-up news article, and we'll share that back directly with everybody. So a couple in particular, that Canada's annual report on the SDGs from this past year recently released. So that's a great one to connect with. Maybe more broadly, there's a couple of questions here. So one is around municipalities using AI tools to map out the SDGs and identify gaps and trade-offs. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. It's actually something that we're looking at integrating into our work as well. And then also there was a question around, why voluntary? Shouldn't there be more accountability, as cities receive the funding from governments? Why is this all voluntary? So I don't know. Maybe Pedro, do you want to jump in on any of that? Any thoughts? Or you're just on mute there. Yeah, there you go.
Yes. Well, I think it's just impossible to live without AI today. And so the question is, how are we going to humanize AI? And how are we going to bring the human dimension to AI? So yeah, it's basically impossible. So it's very, when we look about the future and when we talk about problems, but then it's very important to bring the human dimension. Now, the second thing that you mentioned, and just very, very quickly, the city of Taipei, they have created SDG 18 for culture. Some people consider, and UN has considered, that culture is on SDG 4, under education. I like to say that we are creating a SDG culture, and the SDG culture is basically bringing the SDGs to everything we do, individually and as a professional, as a student. And so I think this is very, very, very interesting to bring all these dimensions. Just one more point, one last point I wanted to touch is the beauty of developing public policy without politics. When we sit different people to discuss how are we going to improve education, we are not discussing political parties. We are discussing education, and we are discussing health, and we are discussing eradicating poverty and protecting the planet. And this is very beautiful because we have people coming from different parties that at the end they align. One of the beautiful things about the VLR is that we are talking about public policy, not about politics. And this is very, very interesting. The other thing that I wanted to insist is the fact that once we have VLR teams from around the world, we have a methodology that is common to everyone. And so we can go from Lisbon to Brisbane, and we can go to any other city around the world, and everybody has the same methodology. And so I think it's very important that localizing, that we recognize that under the localization umbrella, there is a certain methodology that has been adopted by a lot of cities, and the cities are increasing. And so it's very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. And I think we have to actually leave it here. We're at the top of the hour. I just want to say a huge thank you to Nirvana, Marcus, Barry, and Pedro for your time. I know it's late for some, others are in transit, so very much appreciated. You can feel your dedication to the SDGs in this space. So thank you very much for sharing today. And we will have a wrap up of the recording and resources shared for everyone that will get shared back directly. So look for that in by next week. Very much appreciated. Thanks everyone for joining today, and we wish you a great rest of your week.